Ken Buck. Ken is with K.W. Buck and Associates, landscape architects, independent consulting to Dillon Consulting. Ken has practiced landscape architecture for over 35 years as a design-build practitioner and as an adjunct professor of landscape architecture at the University of Guelph and as a private sector practitioner. For 22 years, he worked in increasingly response leadership roles for a Canadian consulting firm with 11,000 people, ultimately being responsible for 200 plus staff across Canada from Vancouver to Halifax. In 2011, as part of a corporate restructuring process, he retired unexpectedly. Despite Ken's exit from the corporate world, and the passage of some time, he began to see this event as an opportunity. It presented a chance to transform himself, to assist individuals, teams, and businesses to achieve their own greatness by drawing on his years of empowering his own staff and teams. Please join me in welcoming Ken Buck.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's working? Okay, great. Well, thanks very much. It's great to see so many people here, and it's been quite a long time since I've spoken at a function like this, and it feels good kind of to be back. But, how many people saw Virginia's presentation? Well, I'm really glad you came, but there's no need now for my presentation based on hers. So, but what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about some experiences that I've had. Over the last 2 years have been pretty confusing for me after this situation presented itself. So, I mean, the reality is that I woke up angry every morning for months and months, and it became a point where I had to change that energy and move it into something more positive. So, what I ultimately ended up doing was becoming a certified equine facilitated executive coach. Now, it's a mouthful, but using horses to assist individuals and teams and so on to achieve their greatness. And I did that in New Mexico. And so these two guys, I got to come over here to see them, but these two guys really caught my attention. It was part of a metal studio, amazing guy. And these two heads here kind of epitomize the way that I've been feeling over the last number of years. I'm trying to scratch my head and figure out what's next and try to embrace change. So, so I felt, as was mentioned, I felt that I needed to reinvent myself. So the idea for me was to draw on my years of landscape architecture to become something that I wasn't. I wasn't a coach, but I felt that over the years I had spent a lot of time empowering my people, as was mentioned, and I felt kind of a calling that I wanted to proceed with that. So we'll move into this, and so here's a presentation outline and an idea of what I'd like to cover in this presentation. And when I talk about transformation of landscape architects, I don't mean by any stretch of the imagination that people need to, that the work that's being done right now is below standard or anything like that. It's all fantastic work, as we just saw from Virginia's presentation. But I feel, and I have felt for a very long time, that there's a need to move on to the next step, whatever that is for us as a profession. And this comes out of my joy and passion for the profession that I've had ever since I decided to become a landscape architect 30-something years ago. So I want to talk a little bit about purpose. I want to elaborate a little bit on my interpretation of the theme conference. I want to talk about adaptability, change issues, and I'll tell you right now that I'm going to be asking you about issues or circumstances or situations in the profession that you think you would like to change or that need to be changed. Coaching is all about change. So I'm going to ask you that. And while I'm on that topic, I'm wondering if someone would volunteer to help me to record on the whiteboard the thoughts that people might have regarding change. Is there somebody that would mind? Linda, thank you very much. Not now, it's okay, I'll just call on you.
Just give me a few seconds.
Yeah, I'll give you yeah, thank you. So, and part of this ties very nicely into Virginia's talk about where's your passion and what are you doing for yourself in order to inform what you're doing for others. So it ties very, very nicely into that. In fact, the line that Virginia left us with was, we can do anything we set our heart to. And that's very much what this is about too. So Some suggestions, ideas about how to adapt or proact change, the power of vulnerability. Vulnerability is not something that we usually embrace, but it has huge power if we do embrace it, and gives us the ability to create some of the transformation that we might be after. And ultimately, what we're wanting to do, or what I need to do for myself, and I think a lot of us in the profession would like to do, is design the future. Be able to take the opportunity to actually sit back and design the future for yourself as practitioners, for teams that you might be involved with, and also for the profession as a whole. So I'm going to also identify my mission as a result of thinking about this presentation and over the last couple of years. We can talk maybe a little bit about what mission you think might be necessary, but what I'd really like to do is get the presentation part of this behind us so that we can maybe have a bit of a discussion. So that's what I'm intending to do. So, change, the winds of change is the conference theme. Change is inevitable and is occurring at an exponential rate. We all know that. So part of my question is, how are the schools, the firms, the agencies, the individual practitioners dealing with the explosion of technological and social change? And I've got there was sort of a whole raft of things that I was kind of concerned about, and I'll just touch on them quickly. As far as I'm still aware, there's only one university in Canada producing undergraduate landscape architects. And in the past, that's been an issue in terms of having enough practitioners coming up. Cecilia tells me that there are now 60 students a year that are arriving out of that university. But the problem is that there aren't jobs for those students when they emerge. So that's a huge concern. Another really big concern for me is that firms and competitive proposals are undercutting each other severely, more and more and more and more, which to me is the beginning of a death knell of some sort, because we need to be paid for the level of work and competency that we have. And to undercut each other is something that needs to be corrected in some way, from my perspective. Public knowledge of the profession has improved by light years since the time that I graduated, and people actually know what landscape architects are now. But I still get asked very frequently what landscape architects are, what they do, and I need examples of projects. I am still, believe it or not, I am still asked what I do in the wintertime from time to time. And I do have a truck, but it doesn't have a plow on the front. So, but I'm still asked that question. Another thing that is of great concern is that what a lot of the scope of work that traditionally falls in the realm of landscape architecture is now being taken up by other disciplines, architecture, planning, other disciplines. And it occurs to me that some of that is probably very healthy. Another part of it is that we're kind of sliding away from what some of our core competencies are. And it seems to me that we need to reinvent ourselves in order to attract that competency back. And it seems to me that we need to add something to that competency in order to bring it back into the realm of landscape architecture so that it belongs to us. Still allowing interaction, of course. So those are, I guess the very last one, and it's just intuitive on my part, I don't have any figures, is that a lot of students and good practitioners and so on are immediately going across the border and not staying in Canada where they might have been educated. And worse, I know of lots of people who are abandoning landscape architecture as a profession and actually moving on into other things that they perceive to be more lucrative or more interesting, or they've just had a really tough time making it as a landscape architect, which really, really concerns me. So it seems to me that we've got to wrap that up somehow. So what is the future of the profession? Big question. We're not going to answer that today. What do you think needs to be done? What do we need to do collectively to get to that future? First of all, what is the future for the profession? What do we need to get there? What are the steps? And what are you as individual practitioners going to take on in terms of making that happen? So the presentation, I call it as a call to action for the transformation of landscape architects, and to consciously, collaboratively, and completely become what we currently are not. There's a concept of an impossible future that I'll talk about in just a moment. But to become what we're currently not, to achieve individual, corporate, educational, professional transformation, to ensure the place in the world for landscape architecture and its practitioners. And it seems to me if it's going to be, it's up to us to make that happen. So that's what this is all about. The winds of change. When in January, February, whenever it was when we were asked to submit abstracts, I thought, what could be more perfect? Because coaching is all about change, and the profession, it seems to me, needs some change. And the winds of change I didn't quite kind of get, and I really wondered, I think I'm speaking for many, who really wondered about Jerry, the storm chaser?
Greg.
Greg, thank you, Greg Johnson. Really wondered about how that tied into landscape architecture. Having seen that presentation yesterday, unbelievably appropriate. So whoever made that decision, I certainly applaud. And we're on the cusp of something. You know, things are changing, always changing around us, and we need to look at that. It seems to me we need to look to that as an opportunity. So what does call to action mean? It could be considered a wake-up call or a reminder, but I like the last word, imperative, because it implies action. It implies we need to do this, and it implies some measure of urgency. From a marketing perspective, you could say that it's a prompt of some sort to continue along what they call a conversion tunnel from the idea of creating an idea to actually ended up selling an idea, culminating in a sale. And so that seems appropriate to me from the point of view of we need to take who we are, redefine who we are, build on who we are. It's not necessarily changing who we are, but building on who we are to actually culminate in something that's more than what we are today. And the last piece is something that really I enjoy, because if we're successful in doing that, then we have achieved a gift that we'll keep on giving and giving and giving for us as practitioners, for the profession as a whole, and for new practitioners who might be considering joining into the profession. Transformation is the state of having been transformed through a marked change in character or behavior. And I like the behavior word because behavior occurs as a reactive processing information. So it's an action word, and I think that's appropriate. So change is the process or result then of becoming different than we are today, or adding to the scope of what we are today. So I thought for context, identify a few quotable quotes. David Houle is a futurist who I had the pleasure of listening to in Atlanta, Georgia in October when we were doing some coaching down there at the International Coach Federation, who had never experienced that kind of facilitated coaching before. But what he said, we have entered the decade of transformation starting 3 years ago into 2010. In this decade, there will be more change experienced by the world's population than all of the change humanity has encountered in the last 1,000 years. A pretty bold statement. He says there are some that disagree with him. But to put this in context, 1,000 years ago, the Vikings were roaming the earth looking for more. So we're going to pack all of that amount of change, either consciously or unconsciously, into 10 years, in a decade. And who cares whether it's actually right or not? The point is that there's a lot of change that's happening, and we can either, put blinders on and pretend it's not there, or we can take advantage of it. He says, prepare yourself for this, and to me, that's a call, not only to prepare ourselves from an onslaught of change, but to prepare ourselves to be able to accommodate change and take the change into another realm that we might not already have dealt with. So this is very interesting. He identifies five C's for the decade of transformation. Creativity is the dominant leadership trait. Collaboration is required for innovation to occur. Critical thinking is required to sift through all of the information that is now available to us to determine what's important and how do we use it. The content of that information and who we become is dynamic, requiring dynamic communication. And the context creates the way in which the content is received. So I was going over this presentation with my wife before I traveled to Regina, and going like, what do you think, what do you think? And this is her comment. A direct quote. So, and I think that's very apropos, because all of those things are what we do. So, in terms of quotable quotes, Buckminster Fuller, who's always a friend of the design professions and landscape architects, is that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a model, a new model that takes the place of the old model, makes the old model obsolete. Barack Obama, change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We're the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. Deepak Chopra, be the change that you want to see in the world and have fun doing it. And Charles Darwin, of course, is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the ones that are most adaptable to change. And that's the ecological perspective that we all operate from. And I think we need to re-listen to that. And I found it was really interesting in one of the presentations yesterday that the wisdom of Frederick Law Olmsted came up. It was with respect to changing grades and so on. And he was a huge influence in influencing change 100 years ago. And it seems to me that the time has come again. So part of change involves adaptability. So there's organizational adaptability, which is the ability to change something or oneself to fit occurring changes. And I highlighted oneself because my philosophy for a long time has been, if it's going to be, it's up to me. And I think that applies to us as practitioners as well. The ecological approach to that is one that we're probably more comfortable with, is the ability to cope with unexpected disturbances in the environment. So what are those disturbances? Identify them, and how are we going to deal with them? What are they, and how are we going to deal with them? And borrowing from William Shakespeare, and I think this is right, I think this came from King Lear, so if any of you are literary buffs, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I remember some were born with greatness, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. So I just threw the word adaptability in there. And wouldn't it be great to proactively look at change and adaptability as opposed to having thrust upon you? Like, why wait for that? Why wait to be appropriately reshuffled out of an organization? Why not have a contingency plan? Why not actively be working towards something new that you as a practitioner want to do to keep you fresh and lively and be able to teach others what you in fact are learning? So further to that, some don't care about change. Some people actually resist change, and there's a whole philosophy that says, from the sort of the law of attraction side of things, what you resist persists. So one of the simple things that you can do is just stop resisting. And if you do that, then that creates sort of an opening for things to enter into your life. So what is the definition of insanity?
Doing the same thing over and over again.
And what do we do? What does that mean for the profession of landscape architecture?
Same old, same old.
Yeah. And some of us are not doing same old, some are, and some are going insane, and some are kind of going, what's with this? We need to change something. And I had a former colleague actually, who in my last role with this large company, I became more of an administrator. And he asked me, Ken, why are you doing that? Why are you playing that role? And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, frankly, because I was really, really enjoying my role. And I was bringing people together and joining the dots and connecting and all that kind of stuff. And I felt that it was a very, very worthy job, and I really enjoyed it. He said, why are you doing this? And I said, well, because blah, blah, blah. That was my babble. That was my rationalization for why I enjoyed that job. He says, to me, that's what you're doing, like it's professional extinction. You know, because you're a designer, you're a scientist, you pull this stuff together, you pull people together, you put it all in the context of a project like the one that Virginia presented to us this morning. And you get into that realm and you're digging a hole for yourself. And I thought, very interesting, considering what actually ended up happening. So then another is some embrace change and adaptability, and I think this is what it's all about. Like the storm chaser, he embraces these very dangerous storms for a variety of purposes. So by embracing change and adaptability, they make themselves vulnerable. Anything that's changed brings up fear in us. They proactively understand and experiencing the extent to which changes could be useful instead of resisting change, and taking alternative measures, reinvention of self, or reawakening, or you might even go so far as to say rebirth, either in this case for the profession, for us as individual practitioners. So here's, Linda, where I need your help, if you wouldn't mind. I'm going to ask you all, just take a few minutes. People usually come to a coach for the purpose of changing something in their lives.
Can we share the board?
So I'm going to ask you, what do you think either from your own perspective as a landscape architect or from the perspective of the profession. What do you think? Name something that needs to be changed in your opinion. Trevor, right on the spot, sorry, but come on, tell us something that you think needs to be changed in landscape architecture.
I would have to say association with allied professions.
And, okay, is that it? Or you want more association or less association?
More association with allied professions.
Awesome, thank you. Yes? Yep.
We need to celebrate ourselves.
Right on. Celebrate ourselves. You hear that, Doug?
We need to stop walking backwards into the future. We need to turn around and realize where we're heading on looking.
So, in a couple of words, what would you say?
Just take the lead.
Awesome. Anyone else? Come on, John, Brian. You have to. I primed you for this, yes. So you need one. No change. Paul.
Don't wait for others to do something you can do yourself.
Awesome. Good. There's one in the back.
Personal beef. Don't focus so much on landscape architecture in quotes. And that it's a landscape design, landscape planning. I get hung up on that. That's a problem.
What do you mean by in quotes?
Well, there seems to be the nature of my practice is always been a little bit on the bizarre side. It never really fits anywhere, but it seems to me the world's crying out for that kind of work. Like that.
Okay.
There's resistance within the profession sometimes by certain individuals because it's not architecture.
Right. Okay, that's great. Come on,
How
some
can
more.
how can I just summarize that in a couple of words?
Lose the architecture.
Okay.
Now we're getting right down to it. Now, we need to talk about that. Go ahead.
I think kind of related is the definition of what a landscape architect is.
Okay.
And if we define it, then I think we can go forward with that.
Right. Okay. Mike? I know I'm picking on you on purpose. What would you like to change in landscape architecture? What are your personal circumstances? What would make your life better as a landscape architect? It's okay.
Come back.
Sorry, come back to you? Okay, yep. In the back?
More focus on the management 5 or 10 years out rather than
Okay.
immediate design.
All right. I'm going to come back, Paul, if you don't mind.
Someone talked about leading in terms of where things are heading for the future, but I think we need to lead on teams.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I couldn't agree more. Yes?
A good friend of mine who's now a landscape architect gave me some advice years ago about change and seeing the environment, and his advice was follow NASA. And I mean, they're all about change.
Absolutely.
They're all about exploration
Yeah.
of ideas and
Well, there is an example. I'm coming to impossible future here in a second, but there is an example of impossible future. You know, putting a man on the moon, putting people to Mars. The thing that Dave is holding here was also an impossible future at one time, not very long ago. And look how it's transformed the world. There are a few others, and then we'll move on. Yep, John. Oh, you got one. Here's John.
We think of breaking the routine.
Okay.
What I tend to do is, it's an annual kind of event. You go from one budget to the
Right.
capital to construction, your budget,
Beautiful.
construction, roll.
That's awesome. I'm glad you took the time to think about that. Yep, Virginia.
Value ourselves.
Right, and that's similar to celebrate ourselves, I would imagine. Okay, okay, look at it starting to happen now. Good.
I'd say mastering the art of communication.
Good.
Both expressing ourselves and listening to others.
Awesome. Good.
Yeah, I think we should externalize the celebration.
Externalize?
The celebration, I think we tend to celebrate among ourselves. We need, there's a huge opportunity for us to own what's going on right now, and we're in a little bubble.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, just a couple more and then we'll move on. Go ahead.
Creatively bragging about ourselves.
Something that needs to be changed. So what, we should change that, meaning that we don't?
We should be more creatively bragging.
We should be changing from being quiet to bragging. One in the back and then we'll move on.
challenge ourselves at all times.
Awesome. Kathy, quick.
Just on the leadership thing, that because we all tend to be like visual communicators, I think there's another level of communication that we neglect, which is, you know, using our words to influence policy and stepping it up to that level, especially federally, but locally as well, you know.
Got that, Linda?
Yeah.
Thanks, Kathy. Okay, so enough said. I didn't know whether I was going to get the cooperation that I did, so I laid out some things here that are bothering me. Like the profession itself needs to change, in my opinion. The practitioners need to change, in my opinion, and that's not to say from any stretch of the imagination that people aren't doing good work. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the perspective of moving on. Practitioner education, clients. We need to change our clients. You know, maybe we need to. I mean, there's some stuff coming up about value and so on, and you know, I want to work for clients who appreciate who I am as a landscape architect and appreciate how I can help them achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve. The role of landscape architecture. Somebody said leadership. That's probably the most significant one, but there are others as well. What are the relationships with other disciplines? What about the public visibility understanding? And the discussion yesterday by Ian and Denise was awesome in that regard in terms of starting to build that. Internal competition is one that's really bugging me. It's really, really bugging me, this propensity to undercut for what I consider short-term wins. And we need to talk and think about the big picture in the long term. Income for ourselves to make it lucrative, to make sure that we're getting remunerated at least to a level that is you know, commensurate with the kind of work that we do. What's the body of knowledge and research? And there was lots offered on that, and in the last several presentations, and lots more. So there's lots to deal with. So how do we adapt and proact to change? And in my coaching training, one of the tenets of coaching, which is a really hard one to wrap your head around, is this whole notion of creating an impossible future. And by definition, an impossible future is not possible today. And so it behooves us, it seems to me, to work on individually and collectively what is an impossible future that we are not capable of today, that we need to strive toward, and to strive toward with vigor. So, by definition, it's not possible today. It's not your history. It's not your beliefs. It's not your paradigms that no longer serve you. It's not that. That doesn't count because that's here and now. It's not what you might call your winning strategy or the source of your success or limitations in the past. It's not your predictable future. It's not building on what you have already achieved and reacting in the past. But it is the future that you invent and the one that you create for yourself by unearthing what you passionately care about and declaring things like, the impossible is possible. The future that matters to you, enough for you to reinvent your whole self, your organization, and even your profession. What is it that is that powerful? And why do you want to do it? And it's not what do you want to do, it's why do you want to do that? And to allow yourself to enter into your vulnerability by being in the arena, experimenting, leading, and innovating. And I meant to make a comment at the beginning about this talk is making me hugely vulnerable as an individual because this is kind of weird stuff in some respects. So opportunities for change and growth. Those opportunities, and this work comes from Dr. Brené Brown. How many people know that name? One, two, yeah. So she's amazing, and if you can find her easily on TED Talks or YouTube, just type in her name and it'll come up. So it creates excruciating vulnerability or fear for all of us about exposure, about whether we're going to be successful or not, being accepted or rejected, and that's a very big one, rejection. Think about a proposal and not winning a proposal. How does that make you feel? What kind of a trigger does that create inside of you? Not being good enough or worthy, vulnerability is uncomfortable. And so instead of embracing vulnerability, some of us try to numb it by, no, I don't need any help. I'll find my way through this. This is no problem. I'll do it. Or refusing the learning or even assigning blame when something like a proposal doesn't come into the office, one that you'd expected. Something like that. And refusing the opportunity to actually learn about how that could be made better. Resisting, in my case, being laid off, or in my case, not laid off, but whatever it was, reshuffled. And it took, I must say, it took me easily 4 to 5 to 6 months to figure out, and I'm not ready to say thank you yet, but I'm getting close, which for me is a big achievement, the way I was feeling at the time. And then there's the other side of the coin, which I've also experienced, and lots of you have experienced too, about having to lay somebody else off, and how you deal with that inability to identify alternative approaches. So in the process, we numb everything else too. We numb our joy, we numb our happiness, and we even numb our success. So what's wrong with that picture, right? How are we going to move forward in that kind of situation? So we can either win the fight, so to speak, in quotation marks, by resisting vulnerability, or we can turn around, and I think it was somebody saying about Doug, I think it was you, turning around and looking at it head on, and embrace it, and win an entirely new life, which is additive to what you've already experienced. So she also talks a lot about the power of vulnerability. And Virginia was talking about the heart and working from the heart. Vulnerability is essential to wholehearted living, and wholehearted living is having the courage to be imperfect, the compassion to be kind to yourself and to others, obviously. But the power, and many people put others way ahead of themselves in terms of kindness. The power to create the authenticity, being seen, being honest, and being heard. Vulnerability is the most accurate measure of courage, and it is not a weakness as most people assume it is. Stopping the controlling and the predicting and starting to allow things and feel things and sense things and go with your whole body as a receptor, as opposed to just relying on our noggins. Creating the willingness to explore with no guarantee of success, creating something that's never existed before. Vulnerability, this is the big one, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. So by being vulnerable, we allow ourselves to see ourselves in a different light and move on to something else. So the power of vulnerability is adapting and embracing change adaptability is embracing change is all about vulnerability. So daring greatly, which is a catchline of Brené Brown's now, being in the arena as opposed to being in the sidelines. The ability to hold something that we've done or failed to do against who we want to be is a way of being adaptive. It's uncomfortable, it's simple concept, but not easy. And how do we break out of that pattern? We break out of that pattern by creating new neural pathways. So creating transformation. Now this is also, how many people are familiar with Simon Sinek? Again, you can find him on YouTube, very powerful speaker, at TED Talks, he's back there lots of times. And I have to apologize for the little sketch up in the corner here. I know you're not supposed to apologize, but it's very little. And there are 3 circles, and we'll get to this in just a second, actually. So creating transformation starts with ourselves. And he talks about a discovery pattern of thinking, acting, communicating, and shifting patterns. And the only way you can shift a pattern is by recognizing it in the first place. So he also talks about the golden circle, which is the diagram on the top. I don't know if you can read it or not, but in the middle is the word why. On the next ring is the word how, and on the outside is the word what. So he talks about 2 kinds of organizations. The typical organization is the organization that works from the outside in. So he talks about computer companies, and he says, okay, you can be a computer company, and most of the people in the company know what they do. And most of the people in the company, some fewer people in the company know how they do it. But nobody knows why they're doing it. So this is kind of an uninformed or an uninspired organization. Whereas if you just take this model and go back out, and you start with why in the middle, why does somebody do what they do? And then how do they do it based on the why? And then what do they do based on the why? Then that's a completely different set of circumstances. So he uses Apple Corporation as a way of describing that. Apple Corporation, part of their mission, according to him and their mandate, is that we are not satisfied with the status quo. We will never replicate the status quo. That's our mission. That's the why. Why do we do what we do? We go beyond the status quo. And the next line out, how do we do what we do? We create beautiful products that people love to use. And then the what we do is we sell computers. You know, so do you see there's a shift there? There's a big shift in thinking, and it's all based on the heart of the model here. Why do we do what we do? So he goes on, actually, so there's the inside out, there's the outside in approach that we just talked about. The difference is, why do you do what you do? What's your passion? And we all know Steve Jobs and his passion, and he was very hard to work with, we know, also, but he had huge passion and was an inspirational leader. So why controls behavior, that's why it's important. Behavior, it's an action. Why is leading from the heart. Why do you do something? What's important to you? What's passionate to you? Why are you doing what you're doing? And that will come across in everything that you do. And this is the part that I absolutely love. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. It's not about doing business with people who need what you have, it's about doing business with people who believe what you believe. And surrounding yourself with people who believe what you believe, and talking about what you believe to attract people who believe what you believe. And what you do proves what you believe. So we could go back through those lines, but they're very important. The law of attraction would suggest that you attract what you attract. You attract what you resonate with. You attract what you vibrate out there, if you will, so to speak. So if you believe in what you believe, you will attract people who believe in what you believe. And these are the employees that are going to stay with you through thick and thin, and they're going to help you develop new products and new services and new ways of doing things. And that's a fundamental difference. And I'm not saying that we're not doing that as a profession, but I'm saying it's something that we need to be more aware of, perhaps, and be cognizant of, and draw upon a little bit more regularly. So let's talk about designing the future. And this is, I'm very much a landscape architect, will always be a landscape architect, will continue to passionately practice landscape architecture. But my shift is in using all of that experience to become a coach. So coaching is all about designing the future. Coaches are change agents. They're helping people to become something that they're not. And as I mentioned, they usually, people come to a coach because they want to change something. Coaching is not about identifying any kind of prescriptive actions for a client. It's not my job to tell Linda that she should do this. There's a big should word. It's about drawing the client's own wisdom out of them. It's their idea, their information, their thoughts, their action in terms of moving on. And it's all about creating the space for vulnerability, allowing people to actually speak their truth, speak their vulnerability, and actually draw from it, which can allow things to happen. So another slide here, there are three types, essentially. There's individual coaching, which is one-on-one, in person or via telephone. My longest client, we had our 1-year anniversary a couple of weeks ago, and she's in Great Britain. And I speak with her every 2 weeks. And she is making huge moves. And we started with the horses, and then the rest of it has been so anyway, and there's team group coaching, and these could be teams that are executive teams, or strategic planning teams, or marketing and business development teams, or even project-oriented teams that come together to work on a project. There's experiential, which is the part that I'm really enjoying, individual or team coaching, and in my case I use the horses as co-facilitators. And this approach helps to embody the experience. It helps to discover old patterns, and what I call do loops from the old Fortran days that no longer serve, and creating new neural pathways to success. So a little sketch on the right here comes out of my notebook, and what it talks about, or what it describes, is a do loop. So here's something that happens. Somebody does something, or something happens, and it's a trigger, and people react to a trigger, and they start going on the path that they have always gone on. Okay, something's happening inside me, I'm angry, I'm da-da-da-da, and that's just going to keep escalating and escalating, and it's going to end up the way it always ends up. But what can happen is that we start recognizing those triggers, and we start, so here's the loop, it just keeps going and going and going. All we have to do is stop, recognize, notice, and take a left turn. And the left turn, these are my client's words, I don't know what it says there. Adventure, exciting, new, hopeful, etc. So all you have to do is take a left turn, and that's like taking the scenic route from a highway. And so this is, let's say this is the M4 in England, and you have to go place to place, neural pathway, boom, get there as fast as you can. But if you turn left and take the scenic route, there's all kinds of opportunity that expresses itself that you just don't see on the M4. So That's a big concept. So there are 11 core competencies. I'll just zing through these really fast. Ethics, obviously important. Creating a coaching agreement, establishing trust and intimacy, having a coaching presence, having a good relationship with your client, active listening, powerful questioning, direct communication, awareness, designing actions. This is where the rubber starts hitting the road. Helping the client design his or her own actions, and planning and goal setting. Moving on into creating accountability so that the person being coached actually achieves what they're after, and then moving on. So there are two models. There's this one, which is more of a traditional model, and the things that I'm going to talk about are these 12 steps quickly. Like there's the formulation phase here, which you can see on the outside of the ring, and it engages certain kinds of activities. Then there's a concentration phase here where we really start to get into action, and then there's momentum building with the power of some small wins as a result of the coaching. And then there's a breakthrough where big things start to happen, and then it becomes something you start to institutionalize in terms of having achieved that change. And then what? What might be next? What might be next? Start over, right? Move on to the next one. It's simple, not easy. Okay, this is the one I love. This is the experiential coaching process using the horses. So the photograph was taken at a clinic that we held for an executive group. And the bottom triangle here is from a guy named Patrick Lencioni. I don't know if you know that name, but he's my hero. And he says that these are the 5 characteristics of a very, in this case, dysfunctional team. But the opposite is also true, that they're the characteristics of a functional team. So people often ask, why horses? Horses are herd animals and they're prey animals. So they're very vulnerable all the time, particularly in the wild. And the only way that they can survive in the wild is by relying on themselves as a team. So, cougars, wild cougars, lots of wild cougars where I live, and hungry wild cougars where I live, and even coyotes and so on. They're on the prowl all the time. So the horses rely on each other for their very survival. They're the penultimate team because they model all of these characteristics every minute of every day. And they need to do so because it's based on their survival. The cool thing about horses, they're black or they're white. And what are people? Multiple shades of gray, in between. So horses will either fight it, flee from it, mate with it, or eat it, like pasture. And that's their life. That's their whole life. And they deal with conflict by biting another horse in the ass, saying, "You're in my space, get out of my space." Then his horse says, "Oh," and then it's all over. And they go back to grazing, like they're black and white. Whereas if that was a person, all kinds of baggage attached to that. They identify clear energetic boundaries that we can see, even though we can't see them, which have huge implications for our own interaction with other professionals and our clients and people. They are authenticity barometers. There's a story, I've never experienced this myself, but there's a story where zebras are on the open plain and a lion will approach. And you would think that if the lion is approaching that the zebras would just take off and get out of there. Well, unbeknownst to us as the observers, that the lion has just feasted on a huge kill. And the horses know that, and the lion just walks very peacefully through the herd, no problem. A week later, the same lion comes out with the same herd, and the lion's hungry. The horses are gonzo, because they know that the lion is there for a different purpose. So these horses are using their bodies as receptors to understand the nature of what's going on and to be able to react accordingly. And we can do the same. And I mean, sort of for the example, in some of the clients that I've had, they're out of their comfort zone by being around horses. And they're probably not as authentic as they would be when they're in their comfort zone. The horses totally recognize that. If they're not the same on the inside as they're behaving on the outside, horses are gone, which may be very uncomfortable for the person if that person happens to be the president of the company or the team leader, but it's immensely informative about how interaction can occur and occur better and to achieve the results. So that's just one tiny little bit of it. Oops, sorry. They teach noticing. I think I talked about that. They interact with people out of their comfort zones. And people, this is really important, is that I've been talking to a number of people about this, is because of technology, because of change, we as human beings seem to have divorced ourselves from the fact that we are animals. right? Always have been, always will be. And so we're way over here, and the real animals are way over here. And if we start incorporating some of these sensibility capabilities again, relying on heart, head, and gut simultaneously or individually, then all of a sudden we're reapproaching who we actually started to be, and can actually use that information very well to understand what you might be thinking or what you might be thinking, and reading body language and figuring out how you might act for a better result. So my mission through coaching as a landscape architect is that I want to continue practicing landscape architecture, obviously, and I have always been passionate about it and will continue to be. I want to leverage the time that I've spent in this amazing profession to help others achieve their own greatness, and that's what coaching is all about. And that's the most satisfying thing I think I've ever experienced. I want to be able to help empower practitioners, including myself, through more self-growth. I want to be able to help to create a situation where there's instant recognition of and respect for what landscape architecture is, so that we don't have to create that explanation. I don't want to be asked about the snowplow again. To be able to attract the brightest and most curious and the most innovative students to LA, so that they can create their contributions, understand what their mission is early on, and contribute to the profession. Most importantly, nourish the souls of practitioners to be able to embrace vulnerability to create change, to continually reinvent why, not what, why they do what they do, and to motivate others by telling them about them, and by so doing attracting like-minded people, to continue to teach what they are learning, to enjoy their work as if it's play, to wake up in the morning anxious to get to play, and continue to build the reputation and role of the profession as the essential service that it seems to me it is in terms of healing the planet. And, you know, coming back to the experience that I had almost 2 years ago, to get some measure of corporate soul reinstated. I mean, the corporations take on the characteristics of a person legally, but certainly not in terms of the way they function and behave. So if there was a way of reawakening corporate soul and making it part just as important as the dollars, then I think that would be very helpful. And lastly, is to be able to be inspired leaders, that's from the inside out on that diagram, and to create inspiring leaders. So what I guess I'd like to ask you, if there's any time left, is anyone willing to stand in your own vulnerability to offer your transformational vision of the future of landscape architecture? A lot of words. But essentially that's saying, I'm asking you, what are you going to do about this? First of all, do you think this is necessary and important? Secondly, if you do, then what are you going to do about it? So that's all I have for today. And I hope coaching is about planting seeds. Landscape architecture is about planting seeds, literally and figuratively. And I'm hopeful that this will stir up a bit of discussion and a bit of interaction amongst us in terms of how we might go even further with this amazing profession of ours. So thanks for listening.
We do have a few minutes for questions or more discussion. I'm sure that this has certainly been great for me to see all this information, as I feel like I'm in my beginning of my career, even though I've been here for 10 years almost. And so this sort of thinking about how we interact with other people and the organization, our companies and the municipalities and other organizations that we work with, all this stuff is really important to the success of the projects and for me personally, I guess, to have a fulfilling sort of career. So I feel a bit overwhelmed. But do we have any questions or comments?
First of all, a fantastic presentation. I would agree with you. A pet peeve of mine is the idea that we compete against each other, and it's really detrimental to what we do.
Absolutely.
In Alberta, the engineers that the association has actually taken a really proactive stance on things like QDS and other things that take the financial piece out of the evaluation process. And I think it's worked very well. But I also think it means that our component organizations and CSLA in general has a real opportunity to be proactive with municipalities and other clients to get the message out that it's more than just the bottom line, and its value, and its creativity, and its innovation.
So how do you think we can do that?
Well, again, I'm not a big fan of reinventing the wheel, but in Alberta, PEGA, which is the group, has developed a strategy and a position on this. And my understanding is many of the procurement processes in the province follow a QBS, or basically a two-envelope system, for example. That takes the financial piece out of it.
But there's also and I'm not arguing with you, but there's also the part about where, I mean, first of all, I hate writing proposals. I don't want to write another proposal if I have to, unless it's a project that I already have in the bag, you know, and that makes me feel good. Because that is what's the word, not respecting, but it's recognizing that there's value as a landscape architect. And so when we're writing competitive proposals, I mean, I know that's the reality of the day in purchasing departments, et cetera, et cetera. But, I mean, it still comes down to, like, price no matter what, even if it's in another envelope, still comes down. And there are firms out there that I'm experiencing myself over the last many years who are 50% less, or 50% more, or they're not even in the ballpark. And in some cases where I know of a project in Vancouver where there was a specified, like the budget was given. And so my approach or my thinking there, if I'm the client, here's the money that I have to spend, and I would like the best value that I can possibly get for that money. But what happens is somebody comes in for $20,000, $30,000 less. And it's just not real. And we're doing it to ourselves. So anyway, that's a big topic. Thank you. Kathy.
We've talked a lot about this in the CSLA, a bunch of people, and there's a few people that say that if you go over to Europe and have a look at the way that process works there, is that it's all by competition.
By design competition.
And so competition just raises the bar to the highest level of creativity because everybody's in there and anybody can equally compete. You know, and there's like maybe it goes to second or third level to kind of narrow it down, but you know, I mean, that's how Berlin, all the redevelopment in Berlin, all, you know, you go to Switzerland and look at, you know, and in all of those countries, if you talk to anybody on the street, they'll go like, oh yeah, landscape architect, blah, 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 blah. You're like, they know what a landscape architect is, what a landscape architect does. It's their lives, but for the landscape architects, it's like everybody has an equal opportunity to access those projects that, you know, out here, you know, you get, you know, they shortlist within cities to ask, you know, the 3 top names or whatever, and, you know, locals get excluded or whatever.
Right. Okay.
And sometimes it's students that win. Wow.
Yeah, how cool is that?
Yeah.
Now there's a wake-up call, right?
But
I mean, a good one. But.
As a matter of fact, actually, I talk with people in IFA Europe. They're trying to back up from that system. They don't want it. They actually prefer our system because what happens is that they're spending tremendous amount of money on developing a design and nobody pays for it, which is a problem. And then quite often clients will take 3 or 4 projects, 3 or 4 best designs, and ask somebody to amalgamate it into another one. And there's a huge design issues with that. And the matter of fact is that when they get the project, their fees are 10 times better than our fees here. But the amount of money you have to spend for creating a design for design competition, they're spending oodles of dollars for that. And basically, they don't like that system. They hate it, and actually,
but it's the same as writing a proposal that you never
fair enough.
look at, you know.
But you know, you can do a proposal in a few days or a week, but have a big one. But to make a design competition takes sometimes 3 months and 5 people working on it.
There's a couple.
Question.
Sure.
Do you have a question?
Well, I was just going to comment. I have a friend, a colleague who was from Germany, who has won a lot of these design competitions. He says you know how to win design competitions, but he wants to actually do work. So you know, I don't think, you know, it's no better than the proposal system. If you know how to write a good proposal, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good solution. And so I agree with Kenneth that I don't really like writing proposals, although it is exciting to win.
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to share my experience. I was very much like you. I was working for a major large corporation, got laid off, and spent many months trying to figure out what to do. I applied to many jobs, knowing we had many skills as a landscape architect, and actually ended up applying for an engineering position with our state park system. And actually went in and got the job because I went in there and showed them that the skills they were looking for were really the skills of a landscape architect. But our state doesn't have a landscape architect classification, and they didn't realize that. So I'm now working to try to add to our state government job, our Office of Management and budget, a state landscape architect position because we don't have one. And so, it's been it's been tough. I mean, it's a real learning curve because they really, had never, they've always looked at engineers to do a lot of our work. And so it's been a really exciting, rewarding experience because I'm now able to also hire a lot of our landscape architects to do the work that we do in our park systems.
I have a very, very close friend who worked for the Hamilton Region Conservation Authority as a landscape architect. And his role, or his title, was Director of Planning and Engineering. And he was just absolutely thrilled to have that title, right? Doesn't even say landscape